on mute, Jane. Okay, good. Okay,
I don't have a copy of the
Oh,
agenda.
okay, I have it.
Okay, okay.
Before
First
we
is,
begin, to add something to the agenda, and that is a discussion of the Gardner's Bay Country Club proposal, which I think you're all,
We'll get to that. Let's go down the agenda
I'm adding it to the agenda.
and we'll get to that agenda item.
Okay, yeah, sure.
First
Do
on
the
the
minutes.
agenda is welcome the new member, Bob Cohen, as our new member. Welcome.
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay. Second is update from the town board liaison. Amber's trying to connect. So if she gets on.
You have to approve the minutes, the last minutes.
I don't have
Yes.
that on here, so I don't know that we have,
Did everybody have a chance to read the last minutes? What was the date on that, Jane?
March.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
325 or something like that.
March
Yeah.
25th.
Any changes, corrections? If not, I make a motion to approve the March minutes.
I,
All in favor?
Motion.
Opposed? So moved.
I'm going to abstain from voting because I wasn't attending the meeting,
Okay,
end of the meeting, and I can't verify the accuracy of the minutes.
okay,
so
next.
we
next
can't,
on
we
the
can't
agenda
approve
is,
them because, we can't approve them then because,
Right,
No, a quorum of 3.
right.
We have 2 votes saying yes and 1 vote saying he abstains, so
Okay.
it passes.
Okay,
okay, next on the agenda is an update on the highway bond. Matt Sherman, well, here it says Matt Sherman's still waiting on well and septic, but we do have that. Bob, can you share? Yeah, did you get it?
You talking to me?
Yeah,
Yeah, I did receive a copy a few minutes ago, yeah.
yeah, can you share it?
Oh, you want me to share it? Unfortunately,
You don't know how to do it either?
on my iPad. I didn't know you wanted me to share it.
Oh,
Cheers. Oh,
Mike, do you have it?
wait, where is it?
I do.
Let's-
It's, you know what? It's going to take me a minute to move it to my desktop and then to share it. If you want to go
Well,
talk
we can
about it.
talk about it in the meantime,
Basically,
'cause
yeah,
everybody
I mean,
has
it'll
it.
just give us the visual to it.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty much good news. The building envelope is a lot bigger than we were thinking it was gonna be. The wetlands are fairly insignificant. The building envelope is good. And Matt marked out all the surrounding wells. So we have a decent sized building envelope there. Which is good.
yeah, I walked that property and I basically thought it ended where that little fenced in car lot is.
No,
in
no,
the
it goes.
back.
pretty-
But
pretty
it goes 100 feet past that.
Yes. Mhm. It's a
which
good
is
sized property.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a really nice big property, and I think that there's like a ton of space for doing something there. And yeah, it's actually like, it's like big enough that you could have a couple buildings that aren't even like right next to each other or something like that. A possible scenario, which I think is nice.
Yeah, like staggering them, like one all the way in the back left corner and then one a little bit farther up to the right.
Right. The only thing we have to remember is we have to keep the buildings more towards the back because we want to do as minimal testing the soil as possible there.
Right.
What do we know about what do we know about the water quality, the nitrate levels in that area of town?
Any testing we done, well, I don't know about the water. I'm more concerned with hazardous materials in the water.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah, so Bob, just so you know, that spot used to be where the lima bean processing facility was, and then after that, it was the town highway barn.
And they put gasoline and other oil and all kinds of stuff in the groundwater.
Yeah, it's also a low spot though, so it probably got flushed out by the water.
Okay, so what measures would be taken, when would we take it in order to test this to make sure that it's safe for the community in that area?
Well, I guess first the town board has to decide, how we're gonna move forward with the property, and then we'll decide what tests and what order have to be done.
Right, so I feel like, Jerry, we're kind of at this point where we've been talking about this property for a really long time. and we have this building envelope that says like, hey, we have a bunch of space to build stuff. And I feel like it's really time to jump on making the gears happen. You know, we got the survey, we had Matt look at it. At this point, it's like, I feel like you guys have to give it a go and say that we're going to do the environmental testing and write up an RFP as long as there's no terrible result.
You gotta excuse me, the town attorney's calling.
So what I would suggest is, I don't know what the protocols are in the town because I'm kind of new to this, but we have a water advisory committee who looks into these kinds of issues. They have certain expertise that I think they could be helpful in providing an independent voice to make sure this property is not toxic for the people that might be living there. So what I'd like to do is make a motion to have our committee inform the Water Advisory Committee on the Highway Barn property and to get their input, to keep them updated and to get their input on their mission to determine whether space is suitable for housing.
Bob, as a consultant to the board and not as a member, let me continue the discussion before the motion. And the way to address the issues, the environmental issues on the site have previously been discussed by this board. And the first task was identified as a phase 1 environmental assessment according to ASTM standards. So the first task would be to write an RFP for a phase 1 environmental. That's going to be needed for banking purposes and to determine the suitability of this site with regard to environmental conditions. Referring it to a lay committee to ascertain environmental information isn't going to advance this issue.
What
I would make one change to the comments that have been reviewed by the board in the past. And that one change is, given the history of the site, I would go out for a phase 1 and a phase 2. The phase 1 is just a review of the site historically. And once we do that, it's going to be determined just by historic data with regard to what has occurred on the site in the past. The fact that this was a area with service vehicle maintenance, it's going to mandate a phase 2. So that being the case, the RFP should address both a phase 1 and a phase 2. So if people are interested in moving forward, I suggest that would be the path.
Okay, I didn't suggest that we wouldn't do anything that we already had planned in terms of RFPs to determine whether the land is suitable. I would assume that we wouldn't go into this great expense and time and energy before finding out whether there's a toxic waste site that we have to be dealing with first. But what I would suggest is my motion goes to the point of having a committee who specializes in analyzing the kinds of reports that you are suggesting. In other words, someone to be involved in taking a look at the RFP to make sure the right questions are being asked.
I think that's the town engineer's job, Bob, not a committee.
I think that the town engineer reports to the supervisor and to the town board. The advisory
So does the WAC.
body that can give advice to our committee, the town, and others. So I would respectfully suggest,
Bob, all the committees report,
take a look at that. I don't know why you would have an objection to people who.
all the committees report to the town board, Bob. The committees are advisors. We have a professional engineer. That's what his job is. We don't need the advisors to tell the professional engineer his job.
Well, the point is here is that there's obviously the possibility of people making mistakes in this, and we need to get these views aired. We can view.
Bob, we're going around in circles here.
Let me finish talking. You don't have the right to stop me to talk. And as a matter of fact, I'm not sure where you get the right to chair this meeting. On that respect, as you know, Michael B. Bond is not a member of this committee. That's why he's not here.
No, he's not here because he's on vacation.
You're saying to me that you think he's on this committee?
You know, Mike, all right, let's take a
No, no,
time
no,
out.
no.
Let's have a discussion right now, okay? Bob, we were introduced to you through the Tut Hill Drive scenario. And we saw, as a town board, saw how impassioned you were and how involved you got. And I respected that. And I saw that you had shown an interest in getting involved with housing. And I thought, let's get this guy who has so much passion in his work and wants to be involved in the town, and let's get him involved in this. And quite honestly, all I'm seeing is you're trying to put a wrench in everything we're doing. The
So I
town
don't
board, let me finish, let me finish.
I don't
Let me
think,
finish. From day one, when I got in office, we acknowledged that the town board is not supposed to be on the committees. Mike Bebon has run this committee since day one, and since he's been involved with it. We discussed it as a town board. We said the right thing to do is to keep him on this committee. Did we do a resolution? No, my mistake. We didn't do a resolution.
doesn't matter.
We
A
acknowledged
resolution,
it in public, we said, the town board's decision was to keep Mike as the chairman of this committee.
it is your position that he is the chairman of this committee and on this committee.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'm pointing to my screen.
I
This is
have the same highlight on mine.
51, I know, it's on your screen too. I'm sharing the screen to everyone on this call. No member of the town board, planning board, or zoning board of appeals shall serve on the committee.
Bob, let me cut to the chase.
No, you can't cut me off because you're not on the committee. Do you understand that? And you can't be on the committee.
You're an advisor to me. I'm here
No,
representing the
No,
town board.
no, I'm not, we're not a committee, we're a board.
No,
We're-
well, actually, you're wrong there.
You can,
You are-
if you're out of order, and you will let me finish, you are out of order.
You finish,
You
and
can
then I'll
a
go.
personal attack on me with no basis whatsoever just for doing so. So please, you are out of order. There are 3 members of this committee. Right now, we don't have a chair. We are each serving as chair the best that we can. And I'm pointing out to you, and you just said that you didn't have a resolution allowing Mike to be on this board. But no resolution of the board can overturn the town code. What I just pointed out to you, no member of the town board shall serve on the community housing board. You need to amend the code to put him on the board. And you know that there are people on this island who do things like they get parking tickets, they violate the town ordinances. Well, Mike Bebon has violated the town ordinance, the one that's you're looking right in your face. And what is the penalty for violating a town ordinance? You know what it is, okay?
If I- let me
It
ask
is
you
a misdemeanor. It is a misdemeanor to violate the town code, and he just did it. And it's not just an average citizen with like a parking ticket. And you just acknowledged that you put him on the board.
Can I ask you a question?
So I'm not causing any trouble. I'm trying to follow.
Can I
the-
ask you a question?
No, you can't ask me a question. I'm not finished. Okay, the reason why this came up, as you fully well know, is that I asked a simple question that I wanted to add to this agenda, which I did earlier. I did it by email, copying everybody, adding to the agenda, simply a discussion of the Gardner's Bay Country Club proposal, okay? And Mike Bebon said, as a matter of policy, we're not going to be discussing it on the Community Housing Board. And then I said, what policy are you talking about? And he responded, well, this is about private property and not about public. Well, I think the Community Housing Board has numbers of responsibilities. And those responsibilities includes to serve as a liaison. This is out of the town code. And this is one of the primary functions of our board, not the only functions, is to serve as a liaison for community members regarding community housing. Now, we must be aware of what's going on in private property in order to do our job. Ancillary apartments are on private property. That's something that is within our purview in the town code. There's nothing you can do by resolution to limit this board, which is not a committee, and none of your orders can stop this committee from speaking on any issue. I showed you earlier, I skipped past it, but well, I didn't have it here, but in any event, it is clear that this committee has the ability to have discussions on issues, and no board member can tell us what we can do unless you amend the town code. Now, Mike Bebon is not here because he's not on the committee. Don't tell me he's on vacation. He's not on the committee. And you're not on the committee. There are 3 members of this committee. So I asked that it be put on the agenda. He came back and then he gave me an explanation that said it was his view that the Water Advisory Committee should not be speaking to the Gardner Bay Golf Club proposal. And then he went to you and the town council. He put this in writing, so I'll be happy to send you another copy of the email. He said what went to you and that you agreed with him that the Water Advisory Committee would be precluded from discussing the Gardner Bay. Now, the Gardner Bay proposal, and I'm not finished, the Gardner Bay proposal is, okay, there is a map that's in the proposal as to where it is on the map. There is on the Water Advisory Committee's website a presentation by the U.S. Geological Survey in 2019 telling the town where the toxic parts are or the high nitrate values are on the island, those red spots. So if you take a look at Gardner's Bay, where they want to propose this is pretty much along the lines of one of the worst nitrate problems on the island. Now, you got to tell me and explain to me why Michael Bebon, with your approval, stopped the Water Advisory Committee from even having a discussion about the nitrate levels at the very spot they want to put 60 apartments.
Bob, I actually think that you're getting to it.
Whatsoever. And on top of that, he used that as an excuse to keep us from putting this on our agenda. So now it is on our agenda. And that's where
Can I ask you a question now?
now you can now respond to what I said.
I would like to ask you a direct question, and I would really like an honest answer. What is your reason for getting on this committee, Bob?
I had perfectly good intentions of being on this committee
For
to
what
help
reason?
to help the town solve a problem that we have regarding the affordability of housing by certain workers who service the people on this island. And I was here as a matter of fact.
Let me tell you why I asked.
Let me finish the question, answering your question. I specifically, when I was interviewed, telling you one of the advantages of coming in fresh is to come out with out-of-the-box solutions to this problem. Not creating problems that may cause further problems. I have no objection to the update on the man wearing and the highway barn things in these projects, and for this committee to explore it. I'm in favor of exploring these issues. But when I'm told that we can't discuss something, I get upset, and that's what upset me, and that changed everything for me.
Can I tell you why I asked that question?
Why? Because you're going to make a personal attack
The
again?
reason I asked that question is because in the minutes from the comprehensive plan, in the group you were in, you said the town has no role in affordable housing. And if people cannot afford to live here, we should supplement their ferry fees, which
What
I
I
would think goes 100% against this group's mandate.
I question the.
Well, it's in writing.
I
It's in the
know,
minutes.
and as you know, I was not talking as a member of the board. I said.
I don't care what you were talking as. You're talking as an individual who is a member of this
Well,
board.
I'm certainly entitled to. It's called First Amendment, and I have a right to redress.
Well, then I'm saying, what the hell are you doing on this board if that's your feeling?
Well,
That's a pretty crazy thing to be saying, Bob.
no, let me finish. He asked me a question.
Yeah, but look, Bob, here's the deal. Like, we have lots of things to talk. I understand why you're upset. I think we should be able to talk about the Gardeners Bay thing. We don't need to make it so that this is like all about you throwing like a really big hissy fit about this. Like, we get it. We'll talk about the Gardeners Bay thing. It seems pretty clear to me that there's no reason why we can't. I think, Jerry, I'm going to agree with Bob on that I think that's a thing we should be allowed
Just
to.
real quick, the town board's logic was, we spoke to the CAC, we spoke to the WAC. There is nothing before the town board right now. That's why that's why we asked the committees not to discuss it.
No, I don't think that's the truth. I really don't
It's the
think.
truth. Yeah, there's a public hearing that was withdrawn for the time being. There's nothing before the
There's
town
going
board.
to be, now that gives us more time to explore this issue in public. We're serving as a liaison to the community. All right, this is high density housing in a water nitrate problem area. that would affect our decisions. If 100 or 60 bedrooms are going to be created by this project, it might affect our decision-making as to whether we should spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars on a project that adds about 18 to 20 rooms, is what I understand.
Bob,
So
Bob, just for a second, just to interject a little bit of science and reality into the conversation about the nitrates. There are standards, which are the go-to standards for the engineers and for the county with regard to evaluating a project like this. And if the argument is going to be made on the issue of the nitrates, what it's going to run into is the density of this housing on the site, which is 13 acres without the golf course, which is well within standards. And the second thing it's going to run into is the contribution of nitrates that comes out of the new form of septic system. And that under those terms, it's going to be a difficult, I mean, I'm not saying I'm for or against the project, but we've heard about nitrates in your conversation quite a bit. And those issues are going to come up engineer to engineer. And it's going to be very difficult to back the position that you're taking on an engineering basis.
Well, you know, you can make predictions. All I'm saying is I don't know anything about nitrates or anything about these issues, but there are resources in this community, including the members of the Water Advisory Committee. I assume that they have some qualifications in terms of evaluating water, that we want to have their views and time to discuss it. You don't want to sandbag these guys and give them all the information 3 hours before a ZBA meeting or 3 hours before a town board meeting.
Right, but that doesn't have anything to do with our housing board meeting right now, so let's actually stick to
Well,
that. I think,
I'm not the one who brought it up. It was our guest, Jerry Siller, who brought it up.
oh, okay,
and
but-
I responded to him. So I think we've covered the issue pretty well.
yeah, so let's move on, Bob.
Okay, let's move on. It's very clear that I think that the addition to this board by Michael Bebon and his serving on it has been a violation of the town code, and it's been going on for some time, apparently with the knowledge of some of the town board members, at least one of whom was on this call who admitted to it.
I'll address that, then we're gonna move on.
Fine, and Jerry,
I'll address that and we're gonna move on. Bob, you're new to Shelter Island. The way Shelter Island runs is primarily through volunteers and through a town board that serves on every possible committee there is, because we don't have departments for every single thing there is. That's the way this town is run. And yes, legally, specifically, we didn't do it right. If Mike Bebon wasn't on this community housing board, you know, a lot of people think we haven't gotten anything done. Nothing would have gotten done.
the
So,
ends don't justify.
Did we make a mistake?
Violate the law to get.
Procedurally, yes, we did. But I will defend what we did. The town board will defend what we did, and we'll make it right. And for you to make a case of it's legally wrong when we're trying to do something for housing on Shelter Island, shame on you.
Yeah, shame on you for violating the rule of law, for being a misdemeanor. You're giving, you sit there and you permit people and you question whether their truck should be at a certain location at a certain time. You spend all this time, okay? And when you violate the law, it's perfectly fine. This is not the banana republic of Shelter Island. Mr.
Sometimes you have to look at the greater good, Bob.
The greater good, and you're going to violate the law to do it? Come on.
Okay,
Where are we
we're
living?
gonna move on now.
Good, yeah.
I think it would be helpful, Supervisor, Siller, if you can
I
continue.
think it'd be
with the
helpful if
agenda.
you chilled out a little bit, Bob. I think you're taking this a little bit too far. I think that there are appropriate places to be addressing this in another way. I'm not telling you to not try to address this. I'm just telling you that we have things that actually have to do with figuring out things related to housing right now that I think you're.
I agree with you. I'm not bringing this up. I'm not the one to try to muzzle our committee.
Okay, I mean, you're the one that won't stop talking about it. So we all.
I just asked Mr. Supervisor Siller to help us get through the agenda, because I'm not familiar with.
Right.
Okay,
Let's keep moving on here. I think all have a pretty solid idea of what your stance is, Bob. I don't think that you need to.
I don't think you need to repeat that. I just asked Supervisor Siller if you and Peter agree to allow him to proceed, let's do that.
To allow what?
To allow you to proceed to go through the items on our agenda. So please,
We are.
please help us.
Bob, just so you know, I'm technically chairing the meeting. However, Jerry has the agenda in front of him, which I do not. So
Okay. I understand.
I just
Okay.
don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
So next thing on the agenda is an update on Man Waring Road. And before I give you that, Chris, just to your point about moving forward on the highway bond, there is a method to our madness. Mike and I have met with the Board of Health, with the powers that be, more so than just the, the people that, we deal with on a regular basis for septic systems. I arranged a meeting with Fred Thiel to have us meet with Peter Scully, who's the deputy county executive, and we explained the situation on Shelter Island, and it's beyond crisis stage now. And they started to give us the history of transfer of development rights and how to move on. And we explained to them that we're way beyond that now. I said 20 years ago, Hoot Sherman and I approached the county about using some of our preserved land to offset density. And they said, you can't do that because it's already preserved. We weren't looking to build on it. We were looking to use it to offset other land. And they said, you can't do that. It's not allowed. Transfer of development rights were put into place, I think, in 2006. And that's the venue to do it now. But for whatever reason, the town chose not to get involved in that program. So for all the purchases we made, we never did a transfer of development rights. So we kind of wasted a lot of, potential use there. So basically what I said to the county was, we're going to cut to the chase. This is what we want to do. We have a 1 acre parcel on Man Waring Road. I said, we'd like to put 4 houses on it. We want to put the well and the septic on the 17 acres that are adjacent, preserved to it, on the nursery property. And again, Fred Thiel felt that as long as there's no deeds or restrictions, we could do that. So that's the project we're going to push right now to move forward on. We're looking at potential home ownership. The town will own the land. The houses will be, for sale. Michael's going to give us a little, help on how we can do that, what some of the, avenues to make that work are. But Chris, my feeling is we need to get 1 or 2 projects like that done. And then we can, at the one at the old highway bond, if the grounds let us do it, if testing, everything's good, that would be a rental area that we would put up some houses for rental. But I just feel that if we can get one, a small one done fairly quickly with housing, it'll prove to the people that we can do it, and I think we can get some support.
I totally am on board with all of that, Jerry. The one thing that I just want to say is that I think that you guys need to make some sort of decision to do the environmental assessment, to write whatever it is. If you got to write an RFP for having someone to do that, or however that works, I don't know. But I just feel like once that happens, no matter what, we're a long ways off from developing this thing. And that's this step that I feel like the town keeps towing around because it's maybe a environmental headache that's going to be an expensive thing. And basically, I'm like, whatever. One is that if there is some sort of environmental situation going on there, it should be addressed regardless of whether or not housing ever happens there. But then we need this, Jerry, right? Especially if this is the one that's going to be the rental, if we're not getting the survey for another 6 months, how long is it before we write an RFP for even developing anything there? I don't know what's got to happen to make that assessment happen, but I feel like now is the time for that to happen.
Okay.
What's your view on that? On this?
Who?
Peter, I'm just asking you what your view is on.
Oh,
this.
sorry, I didn't hear. I agree with Chris. I think we should, rental should be first and foremost before purchasing on the Manwaring Road property. I know the Manwaring Road property would be easier to go because we don't have to do an environmental and everything, but there are a lot more people that are looking for rentals than there are to purchase. I think
Right.
we can get, if we can get 6 to 8 units, let's say 8 units at the highway department, that will satisfy a need for
Right.
the people of Shelter Island.
Yeah, I agree. It struck me when Supervisor Siller mentioned selling one of these houses, because if you create an affordable or below market price house and sell it to somebody, what guarantee is that person going to stay working on the island? They can go work in Greenport, or they can go work somewhere else. We're trying to solve a problem for people on Shelter Island. If we want to solve Greenport's problem, we should build our affordable housing over there. So rental would seem to be the way to go here. At least you can control, who is going to be renting. One of the ideas that I was talking to one of the local businessmen in the area, and he came up with a really brilliant suggestion. And that is, if we get a developer to develop this, he should rent these apartments out to businesses on the island and then let the businesses sublet. So they can put their own employees in that, and that will guarantee us that these people will be working on the island. If you let a developer do it, he may let anybody stay there, or somebody can go on Social Security and live there for the rest of their lives, and we'd have no control over that. And that wouldn't solve our problem for affordable housing on the island. So
Bob, what do you do? What do you do with the teachers or the police or the cops or the ferrymen that can't afford to buy a house?
The
Who's
police-
gonna
police
buy
salary-
the house for them?
the lowest salary of the policeman on the island is what, 123,000 a year?
No, that's not true. They
What-
start off first year 60, they make
Yeah,
top,
let's say it is $120,000.
Okay,
The affordable house on Bowditch Road just sold for $850,000. Peter, you're in the real estate. What would a mortgage on that be?
160,000. You'd have to have a down payment of 160. Then you got to add the 2%.
Cost
I- I'm
$3,000, over $3,000
A
a month.
cop
Yeah.
at $120,000 wouldn't qualify for that.
It's out of the reach.
it is. But I also have to agree with Jerry on the sales side of the Manwaring. Yes, a new police officer, we have a new one starting in January, probably gonna make, I don't know, in the 50, 55, 60,000. It would be if we had that available, it would be a good stepping stone for that person to get in there, build equity, and then say, hey, I
Let's
want
make
to
a
have a
suggestion,
family.
and
What if she decides to sell the house a year later and go work for,
I think Mike can address that.
let me make a suggestion I was asked to take a look at the Manwaring site, and I did, but I had to put it into a broader context of project feasibility and finance and a number of different topics. And I tried to refrain from getting in the middle of all these what ifs, but I have addressed a lot of these from the standpoint of financial feasibility and also from the original task that I was charged with, which was the architectural task. So I introduced myself last time to the board as an architect, retired from a large firm that's specialized in institutional work for colleges and universities that included a great deal of housing. I failed to mention that I was on a community housing board that ran and operated a number of buildings in Essex and Morris County, New Jersey. And I sat through a lot of meetings and got an education on the financial side. So I've woven some of those issues into my presentation. Now this, I have to kind of put a footnote on this, that this is a bit of a broad brush effort in terms of the financial analysis, but it will be interesting to see, and it will literally address the question of what do we do first? Do we do for sale housing, or we do rental housing? And there's some issues there that I'll get into within the context. And then, well, I think we'll be in a better position to have a more meaningful discussion. So if people are in agreement, I'll start off on the man-wearing piece.
Yep.
And we can continue this discussion as the topics come up.
That's a perfect idea.
If, Bob, with you, it's, I guess, stop sharing your screen. I don't know whether I overlay on top of you or whether you have to stop.
I
it.
sent you I sent you a
I
message.
just stopped sharing.
It's still on there.
Oh, wait, what do I do? Okay, hold on. Stop, new share. Wait, I'm sorry, guys. Stop share.
Can everybody see a slide that says affordable housing shelter around New Jersey? I'm sorry, New York? Good. I'm an old New Jersey boy, so that slipped out. The images that are on this particular slide, besides being an attractive image for a cover slide, represent sort of a footnote in history for Shelter Island of housing built in the period, I would say, between the 1890s and early 1900s. And this represents historically what affordable housing looked like on the island. It was simple farmhouses, smaller in scale, and the issue of affordable housing was addressed on a kind of a grassroots effort. Whoops. One of the things that struck me is this particular quote, which is part of the vision for Shelter Island in 2030. And if you look at the real estate market right now and think in terms of what the entry-level houses are selling for at $800,000 or $750,000 or upwards from that amount, it clearly puts housing out of the reach of most of the middle class on the island, and certainly people that are in a lower economic strata from that, which I think represents a real challenge to the island in terms of, I'll use the word culture or its character. A lot of what we enjoy about the island is the human nature of islanders, and I think what is happening is our youngest and brightest young people are leaving the island, and they're people that have roots of multi-generations on the island, and they're leaving because they cannot afford the housing opportunities on the island.
Excuse me, point of order just for a moment. What we're seeing on the screen is a quote from the comprehensive plan that has not been approved by the board, right?
That is correct.
Okay, the town
I
board.
acknowledge that.
Okay, and what is the purpose of this presentation? It says update from Michael Shatkin, but I wasn't sure what the purpose of your presentation.
I think I introduced
All
the
agreed.
presentation as, and bear with me for a while, it'll become clearer.
We need
But
to
I think it's important for my working as an architect to put things in a broader context so that when you actually see images that represent a particular thing, you have an understanding of what you're looking at. So that's what and bear with me, there's only one more slide.
Fair enough.
And that's to Chris's point of, it's a quote from Walt Disney, but rolling up my sleeves to try and get something going in terms of affordable housing. I couldn't resist, putting the quote in there, because I wanted to talk about the conversations I've had with many islanders about, briefly, just about the level of frustration that they have with regard to the housing situation. And I won't be off topic anymore, Bob. So on the Manwaring site, this is a little bit in the context of a site analysis. It is directly across the windmill from Sylvester Manor. From a number of bullet points, I believe it's a good site, and I will get into that. I did the 10-minute walk analysis. The IGA shopping is within a 10-minute walk. If we were doing a HUD project, that would be part of a rating system to give funding to a project of this type, just for why that is important, just that it fits into the fabric of the community and has access to resources. The next one is it's visible to the community, which is a great attribute for a first project. Is given the nature of the site, the fact that it's developable all the way up to the road, and the size of the site, these are houses that are not going to be sort of in the woods. You're going to see them, and they'll represent something to the community, and hopefully that is something of significance, that we have addressed the issue of affordable housing, and we've done it in a creative and intelligent and sensitive manner. It is adjacent to other housing projects. It's right next to the Binder project. People historically know it as the old A-frame structure. So in a sense, it fits into the community in that way. It has no known environmental issues from my understanding of it, which is limited. It is a site that was always either farmland or naturally forested. I'm not sure of the difference, but there was no history of any buildings or anything. Of course, you would do a phase one on the land that would be required by banking, but I just don't see any issues with regard to that. Something that Jerry touched on regarding, I think, all of the sites that we're going to consider, with the possible exception of the barn site, is that we do have to get our capabilities up with regard to transfer of development rights. It doesn't make sense for us to be thinking of, I think, affordable housing on, 1 acre parcels. It's appropriate, I think, that affordable housing is on, a more economically scaled site. So one of the skills, or one of the things in terms of strategic planning and activities moving forward, is our ability to strip out of the open space holdings on the development rights, either in the future, or whether we can somehow do that for past acquisitions. That would have to be investigated. That is outside of my wheelhouse, but certainly would be, from my view, a reasonable thing to do. The next slide I'm going to move forward with is an image of a site that I developed, and it's just an early trial of what could take place on this property. Now, if you remember back to the last meeting, I queried the committee on what kind of houses we should be building. And there was discussions about apartments, duplexes, a co-living situation, which I would refer to as a dormitory setting. There was all different possibilities of housing types. So what I did, not knowing where this was going to end up and not wanting a later decision to erase all my efforts, I kind of came up with a kind of what I would describe as a kit of parts, where all the houses, in terms of the unit types, apartment versus duplex versus the co-living or the dorm style, they all have the same relative appearance and square footage. They're all about 1,800 square feet, which puts them in the category of a smaller island house, more in the category of the early slides that I showed of the historic houses with the additions that have occurred over the years. One of the three things that were design parameters in terms of thinking about the housing, the most obvious one is affordability. That has to do with simple massing, particularly building size. It's not, these are not gracious homes in terms of square footage. But they're amply sized, but they're sized with a sensitivity to affordability. The other issue was issues of contextual design. I really felt it was important to try and figure out what really the local historic architecture is of the community and try not to replicate it and be influenced by it. And the final design parameter for me was creating community, even on the scale of what is a relatively small community. And I'm referring to this one development. You want it to have the ability to function comfortably as a neighborhood and as a group. And throughout the design, you'll see elements that reinforce them, but I'll point them out now. The idea is that the houses all face a community, you know, if you need a metaphor for it, like the New England green. I also included a community garden if provision, and the green could be developed with, you know, other elements in terms of appropriately scaled to the community recreation elements. When you go into the plans, what the plans all have in common is that the kitchen faces the community green, and that's also an issue of oversight and security and being able to know the comings and goings of people here, and also being able to look at your children or whatever you wanted to look at in the common space. Again, this is a quick, you're not going to be able to see this because, and don't strain right now, and I'll tell you why. I just wanted to reinforce the idea that there are 3 different housing types based upon our last conversation. And I'll go into it just in summary. The duplex units are 2-story units that have 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms. There are 2 units per building, and the units are 873 square feet. Now, I said this was rough. It's probably not going to be 873 square feet. But in any case, the duplex unit. The apartment unit is 2 bedrooms, and they stack one on top of the other. The reason for including the apartment unit is moving forward, we have an obligation to, in some cases, address ADA issues. Obviously, the ground floor units could be accessible, and we could include a number of units per the code that met the ADA. The last one was what I refer to as the dorm style co-living situation. And that first floor has living room, dining room, kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. The second floor has another lounge space and 2 more bedrooms for a total of 5, 2 bathrooms, 5 bedrooms, 2 common spaces. And that total unit of 5 bedrooms is 1,600 square feet. Now, I'm not going to trying to evaluate one versus the other, but just say they are in here as a kit of parts if circumstances warrant any one of these different housing types. Now, for the people who are straining, I could go through these images and do a presentation in greater detail. The first one you're looking at is the duplex unit. It shows its staircase, its half bath, its washer and dryer, its kitchen, dining room, living space. There's 2 in a building. Going upstairs, there's 2 bedrooms per unit and a bath. So when you're seeing the total building, you're seeing 2 units in this case. And it is sort of self-evident what the rest of the plan is about. Each unit has its own stairwell, and there's a common wall. The type of unit doing a duplex affords us an additional degree of affordability over the single family house. I couldn't exactly quantify that, but they can share certain infrastructure, being if you will, a duplex or a 2-family house. The next one is the apartment style one, 2 bedrooms on each floor, living room, dining room, kitchen again. The plans are very open because the rooms are, I think, more serviceable, and that's the style that people at this point favor. Moving up a level, moving to the co-living one. This is in greater detail what people were straining to see before, in terms of the lounge space and the 3 bedrooms on the second floor. This is just a rendering of the exterior appearance. The lower windows are the windows into the kitchen. As I said before, there's this idea of entrances having oversight over the arrival sequence, which is a good thing to do in all housing, just to provide passive security to the units. So that was basically sort of the broad brush, and the style is, if you will, if there's a label for it, Peter, I think it's modern farmhouse, but whatever. That was my, and I'm sure that when we actually build something, this will continue to develop and evolve. Moving forward as a project description, and I didn't coordinate with Jerry on this, so what I have here is an assumption that there would be 5 units on the site. The housing, I was suggesting it was the duplex units. The target group, as we discussed earlier, was teachers, police officers, and service workers on the island. The income level is 60% of the median income, which is obviously the median income of the county is $100,000, $101,000. I've rounded a few times in this presentation. The planning term for this type of housing is workforce housing, as defined by the Urban Land Institute. So this is a little different. And when people think about affordable housing, I think they think in terms of low income housing. And what has happened on Shelter Island is now there's a range that has broadened on the island. There's a failure to address low income, and there's a failure for the market to address what I'll call the beginning of the middle income group. And for islanders, that's generally a group of people that are represented by our police force, our teachers, and our service workers. But to expand upon that group of the service workers, these are young builders and people who have businesses that are just starting out, and they're not addressed by low income housing. They're not addressed by upper economic strata housing, and no one has been thinking about this middle strata, and that is something that, if you look into the literature now, it's beginning to evolve as a significant topic, and I'll leave it at that. I was suggesting, because I think I disclosed earlier on that I want to get things done and solve problems, I took an approach of how can we build something? And I took the simplest housing type to build. To build, I mean to develop. So that is one that says, and this is a first project in a complex of multiple project types that we would undertake. This is not to say that we would focus on this all the time and never build rental housing or never build low income housing. This is the low hanging fruit of what we could do, break ground on almost, I'll come right out and say, almost immediately. If I was in a private setting, I could build this thing and start construction in in the spring. In the public setting, it's hard to say that that could be the case. But the simplest thing to do economically, because it involves, this is a zero money situation, no money into the project, only the land. So these are for sale units with a ground lease from on town land. The ground lease is valued at $0. And you'll see why that is when you get to the financial part of the presentation. Learning from the houses that were built in the 1990s on the island, there's a buyback provision. I modeled this buyback provision off of some of the university that I work for in terms of faculty housing. They sell houses to their faculty, and they have an arrangement where they buy back the houses and they split the appreciation. When we would buy back one of these houses, we would resell it to somebody else as affordable housing, but we would have the expense of a portion of the buyback. We would have to fund that up in order to get it back, because if we were to sell it, one of the it would be based upon market values, and then we would split this issue of appreciation. I won't get into it any further. That's a deep topic, but it's the way of maintaining the stock of housing without getting into a situation where you build it, people enjoy it, and they sell it and they make a lot of money. We want to be in a position where these houses can be recycled. In terms of the developer, it's not applicable to this model. There is no developer. There's no reason for a developer. There's no maintenance. We're just building houses. In terms of subsidies, there's no subsidies. This project pencils out roughly without having any money in. Maintenance is by owner. And the construction RFP would be to Shelter Island Builders. The positioning of the project in terms of, I think, how we would present it would be as a model project for Shelter Island affordable housing. It would be our first project, and we would learn from it, and we would hopefully have something that would sort of break the logjam of, I'll say, NIMBYism, or people's hesitation about the community addressing this issue. And it's fair to say there are people that have hesitation about having this type of housing on the island. I'm not going to get into this, but it's too complicated. But it's not complicated, and I'll summarize it in a subsequent slide. So I'm just going to skip over it. But it's all the things that we should be doing now, even though there are some obstacles. So in the case of the rental housing, we would have to come up with the money to buy it. Now, the idea of putting an RFP out for a developer, I'm going to dispel that a little bit. We could get sort of a ma and pa developer. And by that, we could not get any, I venture to say, the scale of these projects is so small, it's not going to attract the real talent of people that have a portfolio where they've managed it over the years and have the capacity and the experience to do this project. We're just dealing with too small of a situation. We'll have to figure out a way to grow these projects, but I haven't solved that issue when you're dealing with 4 or 5 units. How do you bring in a developer that has a track record and experience that's willing to do this and maintain it going forward? Okay, this is the what I'll call my rough financial analysis. And I was only interested in 2 things. What does it cost and affordability? So I structured this around those 2 issues. So the cost, I felt that we could build these 1,800 square foot buildings for $300,000. Now, that seems like a lot on a square foot basis, but that number includes soft costs. It's a pretty rough number. I haven't generated all the soft costs. I put it through a mortgage calculator and I made assumptions. You may look at one of these assumptions and say the down payment's too much or the interest rate is too low. Give me a new number and I'll put it back into the spreadsheet and we'll play it out.
No, Michael, this is good. It's a worst case scenario, I think.
You know what surprised me, the reason why I stopped, was I had something that worked.
Yeah.
My expectations were that this was not going to be a solvable problem, although, without outside funding, without the subsidies.
Does this take into consideration current lumber prices? Because I understand things have gone through the roof.
It does. It does. I am not, if I was an economic expert, I would be in that business rather than architecture. There's a lot of, the Times just had a piece on the nature of the economy they were experiencing right now is a little bit like merging onto a highway, that there is that bottleneck and that this should clear in a reasonable time. We're restarting industries that were stopped. And I believe that housing prices will stabilize. These are not, these are houses without girders, without engineered lumber. It's simple framing. I'm going out a little bit out on a limb, but it's in the ballpark. And you'll see I have some high numbers that maybe even could be forgiven. For example, I have the property tax in at $2,400. After I did that, I realized that that's potentially a high number for a 900 square foot duplex home on the island. And the whole attitude about, are we taxing the land or what? So that, but I get the sense that that's a chunky number. It's a 30-year mortgage. I included insurance and I came up with a monthly cost of $1,400. That seemed pretty affordable, but then I looked at it from a different standpoint. I took the median income of the county, 60% of that for the adhering to the workforce housing, and used the standard financial guidance that is given to people about what percentage of their income should be allocated to housing. And I came up with the $1,500 a month for somebody who is making $60,000 is the right number for them to be spending on their housing costs. And you'll see I have a gap here, which makes this comparison an affordable project.
Sign me up.
I'm sorry?
I said, sign me up.
I think there's going to be a lottery.
There are loans out there where you do not have to put the 20% down to. Every month they come up with different programs.
Well, what's interesting about that is obviously the loan amount would go up.
Right, that is
And-
true. But the
Yeah.
hardest part for Shelter Island people buying, as it's been forever, is the down payment.
I can blow up this spreadsheet, put more numbers in it so that we can get a lot more detail about the soft costs, and people can play around with or give me parameters for a more Shelter Island friendly analysis, and I'd be happy to do that. But the important thing I thought is knowing that the community does not have an allocation of funds to put into this. This is without outside funding. It's not, saying to the people of the island, let's subsidize this housing. And it's based upon the fact that right at this particular time, housing subsidies are not available. So that's sort of the positive one. Compare
Before you
this
move
to,
on, Michael, before you move on, Michael and Peter, my concern is we're looking at a $60,000 income. Again, you can double that and those people still can't afford a house on Shelter Island. Somebody
Right.
making 120,000 can't afford a house.
Right. So this gives them an affordable opportunity for a house on Shelter Island.
No, I agree. I think this is fantastic.
Thank you. Again, doesn't ask the, I mean, I've got some things to put, I want to put in a construction phase loan. I've really got to drill down and do a little more, but my initial impression is that this thing pencils out as a doable scenario. Going over to the low income housing. In the low income housing, I used a different definition of income, or when I say a different definition of income, I used HUD standards that range from 30 to 50% of the median income of the community. And I ended up with $50,000 as the income bracket that I would try and accommodate in low income. I didn't go all the way down to the 30% of median income, but I went to the high end of the range because I thought there was going to be a gap right from the get-go. So I said, can we possibly do any low income housing? And the housing funds that were available under that scenario are $1,200 and whatever that is, $62 a month. Then I went through I used the same basic cost analysis. And you'll see that there's a gap of a couple $100 a month. And it has this crazy assumption that somebody that is in that category could come up with a down payment, which is obviously not the case. But it would take $80,000 a unit, which would buy down the cost to this point where the monthly expense would be within the range of that group that we're trying to service. If you think in terms of where that money would come from, if Shelter Island gets, I'm trying to remember the number, what did we say we're gonna get under the Fred Thiel Act? I think it was
Like 350 a year. That was before the current market,
I think under the current, it's more like $500,000.
right?
That on a yearly basis, we could subsidize 6 houses of this type and make them affordable as low income housing. And this is very, very broad brushed. But I think that's I won't say an obligation, but I think that should be on that is definitely within our mission. And I question if we just do the workforce housing, if the community just does the workforce housing, we've left another group out of the affordable housing equation. To me, it doesn't matter that we have the wherewithal right at this particular moment to do it. It matters that we have a plan moving forward about doing it when certain issues are addressed. When housing subsidies come back into play, then the low income housing becomes financially feasible because it would be work with the subsidies to make it meet the income of those people. At this particular time, we're not there. I think one might speculate that it's important to address this other unaddressed group that is made up of some pretty significant members of our community.
Michael, could you put together, I don't know what the procedure is, but could you put together an architectural plan for one of these buildings, complete with what you think would be right amenities? I'm not sure, when you do a house, you say, I need an oven, I need a refrigerator, I need this, these are the extras or something, and then test it. I mean, go to a local builder and get like 3 guys to just put together a mock bid on what it would cost them to build this for you. And then you get a good idea, ballpark, as to whether you're kind of making sense.
I can do that, and I can also do this other category of costs, which are the soft costs, which is, engineering, legal, construction phase, financing. Because somebody's gonna have to pay the builder before these things are occupied and the closings take place. So I've got two categories of, to your point, of estimated. When I say estimated, I mean, they're not as firm as they should be moving for this to move forward. They're preliminary in nature.
Okay.
This is a very short summary of the strategic plan material. And, the beginning of my presentation was, I kind of got adrift into the first bullet, is determining our position. I mean, in terms of what we're trying to do, what our obstacles are, what our threats are to success, all of that stuff. That's in that big chart. The big chart also includes developing a strategy. It includes strategies for multiple initiatives. It includes strategies for a for sale situation. It also includes strategies, which I spoke of last time to this committee, of making the accessory dwelling unit zoning more understandable to the community, and promoting accessory dwelling units potentially as another source of affordable housing. It also includes certain potential changes to the zoning, which would have new projects coming on board. And there's a great example of this in New Jersey with the Abbott court case with regard to the funding of public schools, where every developer, when he builds, let's say 25 houses, has to make some of them affordable. Now, our situation is different than that. So we would have to brainstorm and come up with what is a reasonable way to get a contribution from new development toward affordable housing. And that may be a controversial subject, but it was one of the things in terms of strategies for how do we close some of the financial gaps, and how do we move forward with different forms of affordable housing. And I know that the unadopted plan for the 2030 vision is thinking in terms of some mixed use on the island, with the idea being that obviously would be residential and potentially retail mixed together. In that context, it would be prudent for the town to take a position that some of those units not be market rate units, but they'd be affordable units, and that be kind of baked into the developer's analysis in terms of cost in working in what I consider to be a very favorable environment, Shelter Island. So there's a few different, strategies within that larger one, and I'm a firm believer that you move ahead on as many initiatives as you can, and keep, if you run into an obstacle, you do all the things adjacent to that obstacle and build credibility and momentum for the project, and then you come back with that in hand to solve the obstacles. 5 things to be working on right now. I've kind of gotten into this: improving the understanding and implementation of accessory dwelling units. And the one I highlighted in orange is the Manwaring site, is develop an affordable housing project on town land, mandate all development include a contribution to affordable housing, get organized as a board around the task of creating affordable housing. I'm not a member of the board. I think everybody by this point knows that. I'm a volunteer outside consultant. But the observation that I would make of the board is the board is a board that reviews and evaluates, and other people are being charged with doing these tasks. I think at this point, we have to organize a group of engage or organize a group of volunteers that include financial people, legal people that have land use experience, and we need obviously an architect and engineer. Some of these will be, I think, reasonable to seek pro bono contributions. Other ones may have enter into the soft costs of these buildings. That's it. I have a shout out to my partner who does all the hard work, and that's Elena Kopik. And the other guy, me, Michael Shatkin. I'm just a front man. That's all I got.
That was
Thank you for that
fantastic.
work.
Good presentation.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks for that, Michael.
I'm gonna let you guys continue unless you want me to stay around for other discussions or for
You're
questions.
you're welcome to stay if you want.
All right, maybe I should if there's questions.
I have a
Any questions
question.
for Michael
Well,
before we move on?
I've got something. What if you presented that? I know that if you keep each one the same, the cost per square foot, building it actually comes down because everything is exactly the same. If you had three, I'm calling them pods, four different buildings. The first, and each one had was a duplex. So
Yes.
2, 4, 6, 8 units total. 8 units, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. 3 of them were to be sold, and then 1 of them left as a rental for like low income.
The only planning issue that comes to mind is whether we can get the county to buy into that degree of density with regard to either just an ask or the transfer of development rights. The other thing, which I'm saying just on an intuitive basis, and I'll have to do more research and thinking on this subject, is, and maybe Peter, you might address this from other experiences that you've had in real estate, is how do people respond to a mixed product in terms of a neighborhood that has some rental houses and some for sale houses? Is it better in terms of acceptance to do rental on one site and workforce housing on another site?
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying about that.
We could speculate on that a little bit, but I think that's the question to be before we do multiple housing types and multiple income levels in the same direct. Especially, I think it doesn't matter if the scale is, very large. You're dealing with a community of 100 houses. I think it accepts that degree of diversity. But if you're dealing with a very small situation, I think that the diversity in housing types may become more problematic.
Gotcha. Understand.
I got a question for Peter, or I guess, any of you who've been on the island for a while. I've had some discussions with people around about this issue to sort of educate myself as to what my own focus group, so to speak. And one conversation, maybe 2 conversations came up that there was some kind of housing that was done in the town center where they sold some properties some years ago for 100,000 each. And then recently one got sold for like 800,000. There's a lot of animosity about that.
Absolutely.
So what's the story there? I don't even.
Well, I'll tell you that's the only housing
No, I-
project the town ever did. It's 6 houses. The sale price was $90,000. The original agreement was if they sold within the first 10 years, they were limited to what they could make. And there was a lot of, and that was the big rub on it, Bob, was that, well, these guys won the lottery. If they sell their house, they're going to make a fortune. The reality was, it was probably one of the best affordable projects on the East End, if not Long Island. The people that lived in those houses, every one of them raised their families there, lived there for 25 years. Every one of them worked on Shelter Island, raised their kids on Shelter Island. Firemen, ambulance members, ferry workers, teachers, It was a home run on every phase. And the first house just sold 25 years later for $850,000. So yes, it was a boon, but in 25 years, you know, you have to give, you know, they're entitled to their equity.
Jerry, I have to, you know, I just, yes, it was every, and they're all still there, all the families except for the
Right.
one family. However, it should not have been that way after 10 years. It should have gone back into the pot. And if they put an addition on, which almost all of them have, except for two families have not expanded on that, they should have gotten that back and plus a certain percentage over the years. But now, if it had been set up differently and that was put in, it may be 500,000.
Yeah, and
Could have
I
sold
think
for-
what, I agree, Peter. And again, it was the first project, it was 25 years ago, you know. I think, you know, it worked, but I think Michael has brought that up, that, you know, there's ways we can protect, you know, the long-term affordability of it, you know.
There
going
has to be
forward.
going
I think we
forward.
learned from that one,
Yes.
you know.
Whereas if we do sell a property, we can put on conditions that concern what happens to it, even if it's 10, 20 years from now. I mean, in that particular instance, if they did live there and did serve on the EMS or the fire department or the police department or did things for the businesses in the town, that would seem to be a win. But if it turned out they were sitting home on Social Security doing nothing, or if they went and started working in other areas or created a business, that wouldn't serve the ends for all the what we're doing, you know, to make this thing. I mean, my feeling is that this should be a rental situation and then not an ownership situation to avoid that kind of animosity and problem. I'm not sure
Well,
whether it's more problems than it's worth, but let me ask you this: even if we just had rentals, or even the one that we do rental, would the town control who rents the property?
Well, that's part of see, that's the rub with the rentals, Bob, is who's gonna control it. And I think that would be more like the Binder situation with the A-frames. You know, you have somebody do it on their own and it's their real estate. They're gonna control it. You know, the town maybe in their permitting process could put some stipulations in it, but the town's not a, you know, we're not a rental unit. We're not a rental agency.
You're not landlords.
I'm sorry?
You're not a landlord.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And Bob, just the other thing I would say is, and I understand, you know, not everybody is meant to own a home. I mean, some people, they quite honestly, they can't afford it. But I think if we're truly looking at, you know, the future of Shelter Island and keeping it a diverse community, home ownership has to be in that formula.
Why is
That's
that?
my
What
feeling.
do you mean by diverse community? People who are both on various income?
Well, we have retirees, we have second homeowners, we have, you know, young families, we have middle-class families, we have, you know, working families. I mean, it's diverse. You know.
Okay, but you know, there are areas of the country like West Palm Beach where it simply can't be diverse in terms of economic strata.
And Bob, that's what I'm fighting my hardest, that this doesn't become.
Well, there are other areas on the island where it's far more affordable and less toxicity, I mean, water problems, that the same problem can be solved, you know, and this is where it came up in the context of what I mentioned before about ferry fares, that if the Gardner's Bay project, for example, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I'm not suggesting anything, but if they took $2.5 million and bought a large farm and got these zoning privileges in Southold, they can probably build it cheaper there, get support from the town in terms of clean water and sewage, and not create problems that we might have down the year by renting apartments to people on a previous toxic waste dump that we're assured is going to be fine. Somebody gets cancer 10 years from now, and then we got a real problem. So
And
you
I understand that.
criticize my questions, but I'm trying to be very skeptical. I love this Manhattan Lane, Man-Waring Lane project because on town property, it seems to be well situated. There's something about it. I think Michael did a brilliant job. And you know, I think there's a lot of things going here, and if we fix the problems, it's okay. But there are other areas of the town where there are obvious problems that I just want to make sure that we're very skeptical. Want to make sure the Water Advisory Committee has an independent view and airs these issues, so that there's actually people in the community who can contribute their ideas and their expertise to making sure that we don't make a huge blunder.
I understand exactly what you're saying. And I would say if workforce housing was the only issue, then certainly that's viable. Maybe you can find, workforce housing off the island for everybody. But again, unless we want Shelter Island to become a gated community where every service is brought from off the island and there is no school community, there are no volunteer ambulance or fire departments, all the police live off the island. If we want it to be, again, I use the term diverse community, then we have to address, affordable housing on the island. And I think as far as I'm concerned, water has always been the issue on Shelter Island. Everything we do is based on our water. We're very aware of our concerns with our aquifer, both quality and quantity. So I don't think, we're gonna say, well, let's put, 100 units in here without, obviously thinking, first about the aquifer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Michael, one quick question for you. Getting back to the density on the Manwaring Road property, all the property behind it is preserved land. And then all Sylvester Manor is technically open space. Wouldn't Suffolk County be like, okay, it is tight, but nothing's going to be built around it?
I think those are things that make for a very favorable argument. I think the county is sort of stuck on a formula that was created around older septic systems and situations where you're dealing with a grid of a constant density, and that's how they kind of come up with one dwelling unit
Right.
on an acre, and that's their internal training and mandate. So I think we're beginning to take the right steps by, sort of breaking through that and pointing out the kind of the realities of Shelter Island and this particular site. But that has to be done at not a staff level, but at I'll say management or a higher level within the political control of the county Board of Health.
Yeah, I think if they see, wow, it is tight, but it's all open space all around it.
Mhm.
They might be like, okay, well, we'll make an exception type
Right.
thing.
And as Fred Thiel said, as long as in the deeds, it doesn't say you can't do it. It's not restricted that you can't put a well on the property or you can't put septic on the property.
If everyone is all right with me excusing myself.
Sure, thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you,
very
Michael.
much. Thanks for your time.
Take care.
Very much.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is the status of the of Fred Thiel's Assembly Bill. And Bob, it has your name next to it. You want to walk us through this one?
You talking to me? Are you talking to me?
Yeah, it says
Oh,
Fred,
I must have another version of the agenda then. Okay.
it says Thiel bill sent to the Senate, covered points, next page, Bob Cohn.
All right, well, I don't have that version of it, but I did.
Can you just give us a summary of where it is?
As you know, there's this 2% tax, which I know I had to pay. And I was surprised by it at the closing. And I said to my wife, well, there goes our kitchen, 2% of a 20% down payment is like 10%. So it's not an insignificant amount of money. But being that it said it's the law, and what this new bill does, it adds a 0.5% to the 2%, and that 0.5% income can be used by the towns if it wishes to impose the tax to use it for affordable housing. And they're going to increase the exemption that currently exists, like $250,000 to $400,000 or something like that, so that anyone buying a house for like $900,000 or so, it's not going to increase their tax at the end of the day. But anyone over that is going to be paying the full 2.5%, which is 12.5% of the down payment, which is a lot of money at the end of the day. And I don't know why they didn't.
Where are you getting 12.5 from?
Well, 12.5% of a 20%, I'm sorry, 2.5% of a purchase price is 12.5% of a 20% down payment. So if you're coming in to buy $1 million house and you're coming in with $200,000, the bank's going to say, and your agent's going to say, well, wait a minute, you got to come up with another another 12.5%. I don't know whether I'm doing the math right. I thought it was,
Okay, but just to follow up on that, Peter,
2%,
isn't that the
is
realtor's
so it's 2.5%.
responsibility?
Okay, I'll get to the update. I just
Well, I
wanna-
understand what you're saying, but wouldn't that be the realtor's responsibility from day one to explain to the buyer?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. I know, Peter. In any event, yeah, that's the responsibility. But at the end of the day, someone buying $1 million house can't just come up with 200,000 down payment. He's got to have $225,000 down payment.
Actually, more than that, because you have the mansion tax of 1%.
Well, everyone's okay, fair enough. But this is adding 0.5%.
Yeah.
So what they did before, they took the 2% and said you can use 20% of that for water quality, right? And they might have done it here, but they didn't. Thiel decided to increase it to 0.5% and do it that way. Okay, so from what I understand is they did it, the Assembly, New York State Assembly and the Senate passed it last year, but Cuomo vetoed it. I called Thiel's office up last week to say what the status is, and they actually were going to have it was referred to first the local government committee, which approved it, then it went to the Ways and Means Committee, which approved it, and I understand from the website that the Assembly has passed the bill. But on the Senate side, it's still in the local government committee the last time I checked. They might have changed that today, I don't know, but that's where it is. And my assumption is that Cuomo will sign anything to not be impeached. So he probably will sign the bill. So that's where I think the status of it is. And that's what, the summary of it is.
So what, Bob, just looking at my notes here, this legislation would effectively result in a tax cut for approximately half of all real estate transactions on the East End. So the way to, because it's going to the bigger sales. The reduction is,
Well, anyone buying a house, I understand, over 900,000 is going to be paying more tax, not less.
No, I remember in one of the presentations that it actually, the 2% is getting less. They broke, Amber, I don't remember what the formula was, but they broke it down so that
No, they increased the exemption from like $250,000
to 400.
so that people buying a house that's about $900,000 is neutral. It might lower the cost to people at buying a house at $500,000.
The exemption would apply to transfers of $2 million or less.
So you're saying it's neutral at 2 million or less?
Yeah.
I didn't read that.
And under $1 million on the South Fork and on Shelter Island.
Well, that's, okay, I'd have to look it up, but.
It's a millionaire tax. Yeah. Mhm.
That's
That's the-
mansion of $1 million and over.
Right. Mhm.
That's the
That's
million.
New York State.
Yeah, I'm talking about this 2.5%. They're
Right.
raising the 2% to 2.5
Mhm.
on all properties, but they're raising the exemption so that if you're buying a house at 900,000 or less, you're not going to pay more tax.
Right.
Okay,
You're
so
only paying it on 500,000.
Yeah.
It's sort of a tax for moving out on the East End. The interesting thing is that the bill is not automatic. It will come up as a referendum in each of the towns. So Riverhead, Southold, East Hampton, Southampton, and us would get to vote on it as referendums.
Yeah, that's how the original 2% was. Every town voted on it individually.
There is a, if that East Hampton and Southampton, they get a lot more money, especially East Hampton, out of that 2%.
Right.
And they will get a lot more money out of that 0.5%. If you take a look at, we just got 600,000. So let's say 1/5 of that would be about 100,000.
Right.
So it might take some time, although this has been a big year for it. It might take some time for us to accumulate. It won't take East Hampton much. If they raise $80 million, you think 1/5 of that is $10 million. So they could
Right.
build an apartment complex on their, and the same thing with South Hope. So if this thing passes, it might actually solve our workforce housing problem. It won't solve your diversity, economic diversity problem, but there's going to be a lot more affordable workforce housing on the North Fork and the South Fork as a result of this bill, so that it might solve a lot of our problems. Just think about the math.
Okay, next thing I have is communications and outreach feedback from the comprehensive plan activities. I don't really know. Did you guys meet with the
Yeah,
comprehensive
that
plan?
was something that I asked to be put on the agenda. And you mentioned it earlier. I want to bring up the screen if I can, and somehow I can't touch this. All this stuff gets in the way. All right. There was, okay, so if you can see this, I don't know how to make it bigger. Anyway, if you can see this, this is the result of the survey of 1,012 people on the island. And I can't make this bigger for some reason, but there we go. Anyway, clearly drinking water is a top priority, number one priority. 90% say it's very important. Virtually is, actually, I don't know who the 6 people were, but they didn't think it was important at all. I want you to look at the bottom 2 lines though. The cost of purchasing or renting housing on Shelter Island is the second lowest priority. And if you go,
I had a discussion with the comprehensive plan about this, and I think this,
what I'm saying before you explain this, I just want to point out the chart here. You take a look on the right side, you'll see where it says non-important. In every category going down to enforcement of the island's laws and regulations, less than 7% thought it was not important. Mostly it's around averaging about 1.5 or 2%. But an astounding 23% of this island doesn't think the cost of purchasing or renting housing on Shelter Island, that is your issue, Jerry, is
and Bob, can I answer?
important at all.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
I addressed this with the comprehensive plan, and if nothing else, this clearly points out that we missed a huge portion of the island in this survey. Because when bike paths and walking paths are more important than housing and employment, I don't think we're reaching the island population to find out what the needs are.
Oh, come on, give me a break.
And again,
I have to agree
why are
with
you
Jerry
this
on that.
meeting?
You know what? You know what that sounds, what that smacks of? You don't like the data, so we're going to go back.
No, you know what it smacks of? When this first started, I tried to explain to the committee, make sure you get a good portion of the local population involved. And that's very hard to do because they all work. And they work at 6 o'clock and they work at 7 o'clock when these meetings are placed. And they're very cynical. I mean, I'm not gonna pretend they're not. But if you're telling me that it's the lowest thing in priority on Shelter Island, you're living in Neverland.
You know what? Maybe you're in a bubble and you only talk to people that thinks it's a very.
Yeah, I'm living in a bubble. Yeah. I'll tell you what, Bob. I've said this to the town board and I'll say it here, then I'm done for the night. Housing, I have 3 years left, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. Housing will be my sand pit. And you can look that up and see what that means. Housing will be my sand pit.
Okay, so here's the problem I have with what these, looking at these numbers. If you take a look at the analysis, what's called the synthesis report, somebody wrote that construction of affordable and attainable housing for young people, families, and elderly is a top priority. That's the synthesis report of the CPAC. So somebody writing the report completely ignored this. They might have taken into consideration some workshops that were done, but you don't know who attended the workshops. That might have been people who thought, there might have been people who thought it was very important, or the ones who attended the workshop.
Hey, so Bob, I'm curious, are you proposing that we should dismantle the community housing board? Is that like the point?
No. What I'm doing is, for example,
think what
You
you're
gotta-
doing is like pretty crazy. You're basically saying this isn't important.
No, I'm not saying it. The people on the island, let me explain.
You're
Okay.
one of those 23.27%? Right, you are. So what are you doing here, dude?
Wait a minute, dude. I'm pointing out data that the town is going to use to plan the future of Shelter Island for the next
You
20
actually need
years.
to go to a comprehensive plan meeting and talk about that. I don't really think that this is like,
If you let me finish what I'm saying, and I'm allowed to talk,
I'm
okay?
also allowed to talk and you keep cutting me off every time I speak. So don't act like I'm acting irrational and you're the one that's like so proper and following all the rules and everyone else isn't. Like, you're
Sorry,
acting
you
ridiculous.
asked me a question, but go on and finish.
What are you doing here?
Okay, let me answer the question. Okay, for example, we have to make it, I think we're going to discuss Gardner's Bay. And what I pointed out earlier was that there seems to be, and I'm not an expert, and I'm hoping the Water Advisory Committee, who do have experts, will take a look at building 60 units of high-density housing on a piece of land with high nitrates. If you look at our priority list and right in front of you, the island thinks that drinking water, quantity and quality on Shelter Island is the most important thing. It is the top priority. Relative to the cost of purchasing or renting housing or employment and business opportunities, which are on the bottom, don't you think you need to take into consideration the feeling of the people on Shelter Island about that particular project? Now take the Highway Barn project, and this doesn't apply to the Manwaring project because I don't see any toxicity issues or nitrate issues there as far as I'm aware. The Highway Barn issue, you've got a toxicity problem that we need to deal with.
That's not true. We have no idea. We're
Okay,
just waiting
I-
for the test.
you're
So
the one-
let's not jump to any conclusions there.
all right, I'm not jumping to conclusions either. You're the one who told me it was a lima bean processing plant, so I don't have any history on that. But
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing to answer your question. We need to take into consideration the feelings of the people on the island, not the feelings of a supervisor who's basically going to be in an office for the next 18 months or whatever it is, because he feels there's a need. And he wants to shut down the Water Advisory Committee, and he would like us to not even
So let's
discuss.
talk about housing. I don't care what you have to say about the Water Advisory Committee. You should go to their meetings if you want to talk about that. It's actually got nothing to do with what we're doing here.
You don't think so?
It's gumming up the gears.
You don't think so? Okay, I think the location of housing is very important to the people on this island because they're worried about their drinking water.
Yes, and
I think it has more to do with they don't want it in their backyard.
Yeah.
Let's call it
There's
spade
some
a
of
spade.
that too. I would agree with that too.
yeah,
Okay, I'm finished. I mean, I
figure
don't
out
have anything else on that. If Michael put it on the thing, I suggested we put it on it, and I had made my point. I think there's a problem with what you're looking at, and the answer is not to go find different people to give you the answers you want to hear.
So the answer is to have someone that seems to be opposed to housing be on the
No.
housing board.
Do a professional survey then, if you think that there's a need to know what people are feeling. I don't think.
I think what the comprehensive plan committee is doing, I think they realize that they haven't been able to contact the entire community, and they're making an effort to do that, to reach out and get a much more broad-based,
Yeah, because they don't like what they're seeing on this page.
no, it's not that they don't like it. They're not hearing from everybody. That's the bottom line. They're hearing from a very specific portion of the island. They're not hearing from a major portion of the island.
How do they know that?
Because if you go to a meeting, you can see it's very obvious. There's
People
no-
who show up to meetings are different from people who show up to a website to answer a survey, and the survey is going to be done anonymously. People, or it's going to be
Okay.
done in a way where they don't have to, there's some people who are very shy and won't
All
turn.
right, this will be continued at the comprehensive plan meeting.
Yeah, it seems like a more appropriate place to discuss it.
Well, Michael put it on the agenda,
Okay.
and,
Let's keep going here.
all right, our mission, CHP mission. By this,
I think we're gonna hold on the mission till the next town board work session, and we'll discuss it there. Because I
Well-
think this group has gotten away from what their mission was, which basically is to review all applications, to participate in the review and approval process, to make recommendations relating to housing requirements, to establish and maintain the housing registry, and to serve as a liaison for community members. The list that Michael presented to us before determine where, develop a strategy, implement the plan, and the management falls on the town board, not on this committee. So I think we need to just have a discussion at the work session, what the actual role of this committee is.
So you're going to propose legislation that does the
Not
changes?
legislate, it's in the legislation, Mike. You're familiar, you keep showing it to us. Read it.
I am looking at it. I'm looking.
It's 51.5B. The primary functions of the CHB are. Very simple.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. And
All right, what's number one?
yeah, and what's number 5? And it says primary functions.
Serve
not-
as a liaison
I
for
can write
community
that.
members.
I
You
understand
can
my.
do that. Go ahead, serve as a liaison.
All right, and that's what I'm doing. I'm talking to members of the community to find out what their feelings are. And I'm taking a look at the data that was kindly put together by the CPAC group.
That's good.
And then I'm looking at the data and I'm showing what the
My
data.
point is, this committee is getting too involved in the nuts and bolts of the
It's not-
project, and that's not their role.
Oh, okay.
So Jerry, I would actually like to discuss that, Jerry, because I don't actually agree with that. I think that honestly, like it makes sense for us to be able to push for making a project happen in a way that is not listed in a primary function here. And to me, I think, right, if the whole idea is that my opinion is the community housing board really more so than the bullet points that are there is to make housing happen, right? And making housing happen happens in a number of ways. That's not just looking at the application for the special community license and things like that. And so I think it actually, right, as an advisory committee, I think we should be able to give advice to the town board as far as what to do. For example, like, I think we should be able to give you a report that's saying like, hey, here are types of projects that we think are worth pursuing, right? I mean, that's essentially what we did with the 4-unit thing on the 2 acres or whatever that it originally was. And the town board looked at that and approved it and said, that's great. I don't think we should be trying to cut out doing that from the scope of what we do.
Again, I think this needs to be reevaluated in front of the whole town board.
Right. I guess I think that,
Chris, I think this has gotten so important that we need to define everybody's role and make sure we're moving forward. 'Cause
right.
really, quite honestly, we're not going anywhere the way it's been going.
Apparently,
but-
it's not-
Bob,
it's-
please let me speak to Jerry here. So Jerry, I get that. And what I'm saying is that I think that, right, like basically right now, like whether or not we do something like choosing to do the Man-Waring property or choosing to do the Highway Barn property is basically just like what you guys decide you think makes the most sense, as opposed to going to the committee, which we are, that's charged with housing, to like ask us like, hey, which of these things do you think makes the most sense? Like, can we get an opinion on that? It seems like that should be a basic function of what.
Well, Chris, of course, we'll certainly ask for your opinion and your advice and your recommendations. But what my point is, I think we're getting too hung up on that stuff. And to get this moving forward, it needs to go in a different, in other words, just as Mike and I met with the county and did some behind the scenes things that we can that we can make a presentation to the town board. We need to do that. And then you can say, well, these are our thoughts. These are what we think.
Chris,
Okay. I guess I don't see what we have been holding up in any way. And
No, you haven't been holding up, but nothing's been getting done is what I'm saying.
right, totally. And I think that, for example, right, it seems like you're pushing for the Man-Waring property. I would like to say, right, I keep bringing up this thing of doing this environmental assessment. It keeps not happening. Maybe it's about to happen and you guys are keeping that a secret from us, but like, like I think we should be able to advise you in an official way to say, hey, that's a thing that needs to happen. And I think that makes sense, right? Not a wait for you to come to us with ideas, this is literally an example of a thing where we're like, hey, you could do this. We, as the housing board, should be able to tell you that since we deal with housing.
I get it.
Jerry, on that subject, remember, we're not a committee.
You are a committee.
It wasn't formed by resolution. It was formed by an amendment to the town code. So right now, we're operating under the town code. If you want to have a work session, you can have a work session. But if you want to affect what we think we can talk about, you need to amend the town code. If you want to have Michael Bebon sit on this board, you can amend the town code to eliminate the provision that says he can't be a member. All right, but that doesn't change what's happened in the past. And, you know,
We'll address all the legalese, just so you understand, the town adopted the boards and committees rules of procedure. And C, #1, for the purpose of this manual, there is no distinction between a board and a committee, or between any one board or committee and another, unless it is specifically set forth herein.
for the purposes of this manual, the manual is about what is a quorum, what are various
So the
things.
manual is the procedures and rules for boards and
Yeah,
committees.
and the manual doesn't trump the town code. You follow me?
There are two town boards that there are two official, there's a planning board and a zoning board.
And it's a
Everyone
community-
else is an advisory board to the town board.
It's,
Bob,
it-
I don't know, Bob
I'm the one
DiStefano is
who-
on. Bob, did you want to speak to that?
Well, it is a board for the, but for, it is a board solely for the purpose of administrating the town program. Am I on?
Yeah, you're on.
For administrating that town, rental program, basically. And when Mary Faith actually set all this up, she was really concerned about about this committee going too far beyond that initial charter that was in the town code. So that's why we're trying to keep it a little bit less, really keep a rein in on how far down the road the committee goes as far as administrating projects.
But so here's the thing, Jerry, is that if you're saying is that all right, if all we're supposed to do is what's on that list, nothing we're talking about here makes any sense to talk about. We should not have had this meeting at all. Like, what's the point if we're just looking at the applications? Like, if you're trying to limit it to that, then
I think, Chris, originally that was the intent, and then Mike tried to empower this board to do more, to get more involved. But again, it's my feeling, and it's my feeling alone, we have to have a town board meeting to see where we want this committee to go. I mean, I'm putting all my effort into housing. And if this is the best avenue to go, we'll go. But I think we need to step back and look at how this committee was set up and what it was set up to do, and decide if we want to change that or to what we're doing now, or to go back to what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, Chris, I think one thing, we're talking about, code changes. Maybe we do add more of an advisory role. Maybe we do add more of a project management role. And I think that's why Jerry wants to talk about it at the work session.
right. I guess for me, Jerry, and whatever, I actually wish that Mike was here to be part of this discussion, but I just think if you're not going to let us do any advising, then there's just no point. Like, give me a call when we have an application, and then and then we can have a meeting, right? Because otherwise it doesn't make sense.
Let me give you an example, Chris. The comprehensive plan had a meeting at Jimbo Zionet's house.
Mhm.
And one of the things we talked about was housing. And for the most part, it was people of, your age group that were there.
Mhm.
Not one of them knew about the housing registry.
Mhm.
Not one
They
of them.
found out and I've been bombarded. I've
Well,
got
they found out.
like
after that
200 of
meeting.
them.
And you were at that meeting. And that's when and it was, that was mind boggling to me. So obviously the housing committee isn't doing a very good job.
But come on, Jerry, do you think we should tell the community to go submit applications and they find out that there's only going to be 12 or 14 or 20 units built maybe 2 years from now after all these problems are solved?
No,
And
but
these
Well,
people-
Bob, how do you identify a problem if people don't say they need housing?
But
It's
you're
not
gonna
an
create-
application, it
Oh,
was just
you
a
want-
survey.
Don't call it stupid. I mean, give me a break. That would be the worst thing to do to people.
But
Why would you do that? It shouldn't even be on the website. It's been on there for several years. Even Michael was saying the same thing.
But Bob, he's actually talking about a different thing. He's talking about the expression of interest, which was explicitly made to address that, which is just a thing to say to the town, we're interested.
Okay.
Look, Jeff,
I-
I'm not going to say that I think we've been doing a good job. I don't. Like, I think, right, we've mostly been sitting around having a bunch of meetings like this where nothing is happening. I think the last election is like what has made the most happen for housing since, whatever, the thing on Bowditch Road. I'm not trying to say that I think it's like, we're these great people that you're holding back by limiting and that sort of thing. But my point is that if you limit the capacity, right, then like if we're actually able to be more on top of it, right, you wouldn't, I like, if we were doing a better job, you wouldn't be talking about limiting the capacity of what we're doing, I don't think.
Because I'm not saying you're not doing a better job. The town board takes the brunt of it. I mean, the buck stops with us. We let this thing slip by us and, it's just, nothing's been, I'm not saying it's the committee's fault. It's the town board's fault. And we need to reevaluate and see how we make this thing work.
Yeah, Chris, I think part of it is that it does need to be somewhat restructured on a code level to allow for a better process as far as putting projects together.
Right, I guess
It's really not where it was designed for to begin with. And
Right,
so we really
no.
need to design something that would work better that way.
I think the function of the community housing board should be expanded, because basically right now all the functions are things that we don't do, and all of the things that we actually do are things that should be what the code says we're doing, right? Even though we could be doing a better job of it.
That's
And
yeah, kind of exactly, I think, where we're going with this.
okay, I just want to make sure, because I feel like when you guys are talking about it, you're making it sound like it's like, oh, it's getting out of hand, like we're like getting involved in too many.
No, not at all. I think it just needs to be
There's just one very
reevaluated and
specific
given
thing
some
about
direction.
Okay, I just
applications for other boards that are the problem. But that's
Okay.
not yeah,
I
that's
just want to make
talking about things generally.
okay.
It seems-
I
it
think
seems
that's
to me-
great. I just really want to push for that, and that's why I want to be able to talk about that here. Is that I feel like whatever. I
Well,
miss
it seems to me, what I saw tonight, the board's made some remarkable progress in some areas. But what I object to is that the town board has its own objectives. And, if you don't want advice, if you don't want any dissenting opinions, why don't you write into the town code that we all have to agree with you? I mean, that's generally what you're saying. You guys are going to rewrite this code with this committee because you think it hasn't made any progress over the past 2 years. And Michael Bebon has been a total failure. I don't think he has been a total failure. I think you saw a tremendous, excellent presentation tonight that shows that this board has done a good job. I wasn't even part of it. I'm not taking credit for it. I'm asking questions. And like I said, I'd rather come up with out-of-the-box solutions than getting the town. Michael Shatkin said earlier today that, we got to go, go, go. On the other hand, you don't want to go, go, go if the project's going to turn out to be a disaster. You got to really ask the questions. And I've been on public boards and I want my board of directors I want them to really ask me, do we really want to do this? And I better defend it. I'm not going to eliminate my board members who disagree with who disagree with me. That's a recipe for disaster. And that's what I'm seeing here. I mean, I'm creating objections.
Can you stop sharing the screen so we can see everybody, please?
Can I what?
Could you stop sharing the screen so we can see
Oh, okay.
everybody?
I'm sorry, sure. Anyway, that's my view of it. I think you have a view. What did you say that something about a sand trap or a sandbag or that?
Sand pit. Look up Jerry Siller in a sand pit.
So I don't understand what that means.
Well, yeah, ask around.
I don't know what that means, frankly.
You haven't
but
lived here long enough.
is that, I don't know whether that means you're going to die on it or I don't get it. But if you have a jihad on a particular issue, don't skirt over the town code, don't violate the town code, follow the rules, change the town code if you want. But at this point, we have what we have. The guys have made great progress. I don't agree with everything with it, but there are certain things here that I like and I see. And as long as I'm on the board, and you can probably rewrite the town code to get me off the board. You want to get people on that agree with everything, that's going to be a problem that you're going to have to deal with in the future when you're in the sand pit and everybody else is, paying the bills. So I've had my set on that. So do we want to go on, Peter, to the task for the next 6 months?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you don't have
No.
one? Okay, so the next thing on the agenda was CHB task next 6 months. A was plan for utilization of funding of the Thiel bill if passed, legal documents for projects, RFPs, transfer of development plan rights, coordination with CPF. I don't even know what that is. View of chapters 51 and 150 to 33 of what? I don't know what that is either, to be honest with you. And communications, products, and social media presence. So those are, I guess, Michael's tasks that he was suggesting that we do, and I don't have any view on it. Peter, Chris, Bill.
Okay.
All right, well, if there's no other business, well, actually, I do have a suggestion that I want to make, and that is, where'd it go? Okay. We have on the table a motion, and which I did orally, and I didn't get a second on it. So if we don't get my motion was to seek the recommendation of the Water Advisory Council on the Highway Barn project, not on the Man-Waring project, to keep them updated and informed on what we're doing, so that when we do an RFP, for example, for the toxicity problems, whatever they might have there, if there is one, I'd like to get their input and have them give the town. I don't want
Bob, just so you understand, that the Water Advisory Council are all volunteers, just like this committee. There are no experts on it.
Well, but they certainly know more about it than we do, I would think. And they also know people who are experts on it, who can be independent to look. You're going to hire somebody, the architect, to do it. He gets paid a lot of money, and he's going to try to solve that problem any which way. And we have to make sure that, as a board and you as a town board, to make sure that everything, all the questions are asked, to make sure that we don't build housing on something that's going to, cause cancer or kill people, down the road. You have to be real careful about that. We see what happens in Michigan and in towns like that, and you don't want to have that reputation. And I certainly don't want to be living near anything like that if it is. So that's it. If I don't have a
So
second,
just so I understand, you're making a motion that the WAC you're making a motion to make a recommendation to the town board that the WAC look into this.
yeah, to be updated with information, okay, regarding the Highway Barn project because of the particular problem that may be in that land, and to give them information and to give you a recommendation before we go forward with actually doing the project,
Don't you think we would do that? I mean, I'm
Peter,
kind of surprised. You don't think we
Their
would
rec-
cover all our bases?
Peter, would you second the motion?
Their recommendation would be for us to find out if there's a problem. We have to find a problem first,
Amber, do
if
you want to
there
say
is a
something?
problem.
Well,
So we need
I'm saying,
the,
for example, if we put together an RFP to hire an expert in, this toxicity problem or nitrate problem or whatever it is, I would like the community advisory, it's getting late, I'm sorry, the Water Advisory Committee to take a look at the RFP, and maybe they know someone who can look at it and say, oh, I want you to ask 3 other questions. I want you to test for X, Y, and Z. That's all I'm suggesting.
Why would we ask a volunteer committee to do something when we have a town engineer that's his job?
Because the way you are sounding, Jerry, that town engineer is going to find a solution to this problem, whether there's a solution or not.
And you honestly think I have a big enough ego that I'm gonna do things the way I want them at the risk of the town's health and safety?
That's what you're sounding like. And
Okay,
all I'm suggesting is that we have other people take a look at it.
I guess you really don't know me.
I'm gonna second.
Well, let's find out results first, and then if there's something, then we involve
Do I
those.
have a second on it or no?
Amber,
Okay.
you wanna say something?
Erin,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I spoke to Kimberly Ray, who has done litigation for Superfund cleanup sites. And she was the one who suggested, and Michael Shatkin, I was on the meeting via phone earlier, seemed to confirm that doing a phase 1 study of the property is like our first step. And so that is not an architecture firm. All they're doing is coming in. It's, I think, more of an engineering and geological, firm that does this type of work. So I think it is something, that the town engineer, and she is willing to, if it's a small project, she will help us with the RFP. If it gets to be something bigger, she has expertise, we would hire her to help us write that RFP because she's has that experience. Our
Okay.
town engineer would then facilitate, the review of it. And because he is a member of the WAC, if he felt it was, important to, okay, WAC should be looking at this. So we do already have in place and, have started to reach out to find like, these are the steps that we need to take, and these will be the people that get involved.
Good.
So
Good.
I'm not sure going to WAC is the right next step. We got to
Yeah.
get the town board moving on, let's get this RFP out there.
I'll withdraw the motion. I think that's a great answer. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to suggest is on the Gardner Bay project, which is the last item on the agenda, and I don't know how to get this out of the way. I wanted to propose this motion. Whereas, the screenshot that I showed earlier was the United Geological Survey. It's a federal government agency, and they basically, it looks like, from my lay eyes, that the high density housing appears to be above or near groundwater with high concentrations of nitrate. It's the stated mission of the town's Water Advisory Committee to, quote, identify and report potential water quality and quantity issues. So I would move that we resolve that the Community Housing Board recommend to the town board to seek the recommendation of the Water Advisory Committee on any water quality or quantity issues or other safety issues, questions arising from the location of the high-density housing project proposed by Gardner's Bay Club. The reason why I suggest this is that Michael specifically said he told the Water Advisory Committee that they can't discuss this as town policy. And I don't agree with that. I think that it is the stated policy of the Water Advisory Committee to identify water quality issues, and we should simply recommend to the town board to seek the town's Water Advisory Committee. Now, that means if we pass the motion, we just simply send it over to the town board and they can ignore it. That's what our job is. So I ask, is there a second to this motion?
Not from me.
Peter?
We really don't have anything to do with the Gardner's Bay Country Club project.
Well,
It's apples to oranges.
I think there are plenty of reasons for us to discuss it. I don't think as a committee, we need to be recommending to the town board that they talk to another committee. I think maybe you got to write an email yourself or something there, Bob.
okay, that's fair enough. I'm just testing the waters here because
Stir in the pot.
well,
Those waters.
maybe it's collateral damage. Maybe it's collateral damage on him, yeah. But in any event, I disagree with Peter. I do think it's within our purview to at least, and I agree with Chris, that it's within our purview to discuss the Gardner Bay's project, unless Peter, I misunderstood you. I think we should be able to discuss this as things progress because it may affect what we ultimately may decide, in terms of some of these projects. It wouldn't affect my view of certainly of the Man-Waring project, which I don't see any showstoppers on at this point. Anyway, okay, I'm done. And if I will stop this and
Anything from anybody else? Jerry?
I don't have anything.
Julie Lane,
Anybody else make a motion to End the meeting at 9:11.
I'm sorry, who just
All in
started?
favor?
Hold on. Who else is on the call? Did Julie have any questions? Chris?
I'm fine, thanks.
Very good. All right, thank you. All
I
right.
make a motion
I-
to adjourn.
Oh, wait, Chris,
I'd love to make a motion to adjourn.
I just did.
Oh, I'm gonna second that motion then.
Okay, all in favor? So moved.
So moved, yes. All right, thank you for listening to my devil.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jerry, Bob,
Bye.
Chris,
Thank you.
everybody.